After having spent several days with Alan Wake Remastered, I find myself questioning whether I love the mystery that regularly subverted my expectations, or hated the story that hand-waved plot holes by deifying the main character. Truth be told, I think that I quite like that conundrum because it signals to me that I'm really engaging with the source material and trying to pull it apart, which is a fate far better than placing the controller down and moving on without giving so much as an iota of a neuron as to what I'd just played. Indeed, the journey into Bright Falls is one that I will probably reflect on regularly for years to come, but one that I likely won't replay as much as I watch YouTube videos about. That is, of course, to say that Alan Wake is a wildly fun ride, but a fairly uninspired video game. Alan Wake is a decorated author caught in the grips of a writer's block that has put his life on pause. In an attempt to reconnect, he and his wife, Alice, go on a vacation in a sleepy town nestled quaintly in the Pacific Northwest. As you would have guessed, Alice soon goes missing, and it is up to Alan to discover what happened. These central motivations feel familiar enough, having likely taken place in countless novels from countless more authors that this game knowingly and frequently nods to. Much like those novels, though, the simplicity is made complicated by the nature of the supernatural manifestations that permeate the world, and Bright Falls quickly becomes a town adjacent to reality. A town where the laws of status quo have buckled under the force of something sinister and primordial. Following the dark, tangled events of Alice's disappearance, Alan awakes in a car crash, having missed a week of his life. Soon enough, he finds some answers in manuscript pages that are autobiographically penned. A novel that is dictating moments both to come and off camera. The only thing is, he doesn't remember writing it. I have to admit, I was deeply enraptured by that mystery. How did Alan pierce through the constructs of time to place breadcrumbs for himself to then consume? And why? Wouldn't that create a paradox where he endlessly finds himself at the same place dictating actions to himself in a loop? Alan Wake asks the audience to not only suspend disbelief and buy into the story at hand, but also to let your mind run wild with the supposition that whatever is written becomes reality. On more than one occasion, I would murmur a stifled, "whoa," to myself following bombshell information drops, even if some of those drops felt biblical in nature. As we discover that Alan has written the events of the game we're experiencing, questions begin to crop up. Why is an FBI agent following Alan seemingly suddenly? How does Alan escape certain situations that he should not have been able to escape? Most of the answers to my questions are generally explained with, well, because Alan wrote the manuscript that way. And while this doesn't ruin the game for me, it does feel like a cop-out answer when potential plot holes or plot confusion are chalked up to scripture-like allowances. However, as I progressed the story and threw darts at the board of possible endings, I found myself sucked in, being convinced of red herrings, bucked up assertions, and ever transfixed to the carrot that dangled in front of my eyes. In reaching out to that carrot, the narrative drip feed, the gameplay was a vehicle, one that is missing a side mirror and has no AC. It works and certainly could be worse. I don't hate it, but I wish it were better. The Deadite-esque darkness that sought existence in and control over Bright Falls hates light. Armed with flashlights, flashbang, grenades, flares, and more, Alan has to expose the Taken to light and force corporeality before dispatching them with firearms. Initially, I thought this was an excellent and neat idea. Dodge attacks, fix your flashlight on the figures, and then fire away. Variety is sprinkled in by way of driving and demolition derby segments, or stretches where wheelbarrows become possessed and throw themselves at you. Occasionally, all of these elements blend together. I'll be the first to admit that having a Toyota pickup come to life and hurl itself at me left me apprehensive of everything with an increasingly specific brand of paranoia. However, that is as interesting as it really gets in Alan Wake. As inventive and reality-bending as the narrative gets, actually fighting bad guys felt so pedestrian that it created a sort of cognitive dissonance. Did I like Alan Wake or not? I found myself primarily existing through horde-like encounters purely to reach the next piece of the expository puzzle rather than being excited for interactive moments that further reinforced the madness that was happening around me. Set pieces, world destruction, and flashy moments definitely acted to spruce up and distract from the action in incredibly refreshing ways, adding much needed gravitas to increasingly perilous conditions. Sadly, though, the ground would rupture and rumble under Alan's feet, only to then spawn 7 construction workers that needed dispatching in essentially the same way they did 5 hours ago. An expectation is set by the narrative that the rest of the process doesn't fully measure up to. It scratches the surface, and behind the dull, chipped paint, we see a glimpse of what could have been without ever having a chance to reach it. Technically speaking, Alan Wake isn't hindered by its age per se, but there are definitely nitpicks to be had, especially if this is your first foray into the franchise. While the remastered game did see a visual overhaul, leading to gorgeous foliage, brilliant lighting, and much-needed cutscene lip-syncing, I can very much see and feel the jank of an 11-year-old game under the surface, despite playing on a PS5. Talking characters outside of cinematics have concrete, stiff bodies with gyrating bobbleheads. Alan's run animation is still not great, and God forbid you ever need to climb anything. In combat, there's no visual representation for stamina, leading to a lot of James Sunderland-like moments of breathlessness when I really needed Alan to dodge an incoming attack. As puzzling as it is, I did enjoy the roller coaster experience of Alan Wake. Gameplay will certainly satiate most people, but ultimately felt uninspired to me in contrast to the events of the world the player is asked to believe. The pillar of immense strength in Alan Wake is actually the narrative adventure that attempts to dig deep and offer up an atmosphere and structure that feels different and inviting. If you can squint past the flex tape slapped over potential plot holes, well then I think you too can quite enjoy Alan Wake.